The Wild Robot was directed by Chris Sanders, whose work you may be familiar with. He directed some excellent animated features in the past, such as Lilo and Stitch and How to Train Your Dragon. And this is based on a popular book series, but they might just be picture books. Sorry, don't hate me, I'm not actually sure because I'm not familiar with the source material. So I went into this with a fresh set of eyes, having no knowledge of what the Wild Robot is. The movie follows Roz, a utilitarian robot sent by its manufacturer to a customer, but instead of making its way to the destination, she crash lands on an uninhabited island. And because of her programming, Roz needs a task. That's the way she's designed. But there are no people on this island, only animals, so she has to not only learn how to communicate with them, but also search for a task so that she has a purpose. And she finds that in the form of an orphaned goose named Bright Bill. Let's not beat around the bush. This movie's great. It's one of the best family comedies of the year. Not only is it very funny, it's also very heartfelt, tells a great story with a lot of themes that I think adults and kids can both take away. The humor surprised me in that a lot of the jokes are actually about death and the food chain on this island. It gets surprisingly dark at times. Kids were laughing at the jokes, and I don't think it's ever too dark or too grim or anything, but it was a little unexpected. But I have to think back to the old Pixar days where death was actually a pretty high focus, so I guess this is kind of bringing that trend back. Also, just gotta point out, there were multiple voice actors in this film who I did not recognize at all. In fact, I don't know that I recognized anybody until looking at the cast after watching the film. Lupita Nyong'o plays Roz, and I think she does a great job of having that artificial sounding voice, something you'd hear from a machine that's trying to imitate a human voice, but at the same time, she's able to bring emotion to it as well. But just listen to some of these supporting cast members. Pedro Pascal is Fink, this mischievous fox that they encounter. Catherine O'Hara and Mark Hamill both have supporting roles, and I didn't recognize any of these voice actors. I also adore the animation style. It's beautiful to look at. It's not photorealistic, more of like a pastel painting that moves. In fact, when Sanders was initially talking about developing this film, he said he wanted it to be like a Monet painting in a Miyazaki forest, which is exactly what he's brought to life here. It's gorgeous to look at. Like, there are shots in here that I would make my desktop wallpaper and probably keep it that way for a long time. Moving back into the story and the themes, I always say that the best animated films and the best films for children are also made for adults. And you can have both demographics watch the film and take away different things. So this is one of those films that I think kids can watch now and totally appreciate for different reasons, and then revisit them in like 20 years and be like, holy shit, there's a lot more going on under the surface. Other than just a silly comedy, kids will see this as a story about finding your identity in a world in which you're different from everyone else. And adults will see it as a story about parenthood and the sacrifices you have to make for your children, as well as how to guide them towards autonomy. I think it's also about overcoming your instincts and perhaps going against them when it's the right thing to do. And the familial bond between Roz and Bright Bill is super endearing, like genuinely gets you choked up at points. The third act is a bit messy because for the first 2/3 of this movie, there's no true antagonist, there's no massive conflict that needs to be solved, and it kind of feels like they just wanted to throw one in there. So we then get into this nature versus technology kind of battle in which the manufacturers of Roz come back to retrieve her for her memories. And obviously the animals don't want her to leave at this point. That entire subplot feels like it was absolutely shoehorned into the movie at the last minute because they felt like there wouldn't be enough of a conflict if it just ended before these robots came to get her. I'm sure there are people who will think I'm nitpicking, but for me it just felt like a giant departure from what the film had been up until that point. And I think they could have avoided that issue by simply introducing these other characters earlier on in the film and having it build towards this third act fight, instead of it just suddenly happening out of thin air. But for the most part, I dug The Wild Robot. It is absolutely breathtaking to look at. It has an endearing story, one of the few films this year that's managed to get me slightly emotional. And yeah, if you're looking for something to take the family to, this is an easy pick. It's awesome. I'm gonna give The Wild Robot 4 stars. The only one that I can think of that even competes with this is Inside Out 2. I did really like that film as well. As far as which one I think is better, it's tough to say right now. I'll leave that question to those of you who have seen it down in the comments. As always, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you want more content like this, and I'll catch you all in the next one. See you later.